Welcome to A Theory of Everything. My name is Luis Razo, the Director of the European Institute of Science and Management. Today we're going to compare the work of two prominent theoretical physicists, Sean Carroll and Juan Maldacena, to see what we can glean from that work about the purpose of life according to physics. If you've watched any of our other videos, you'll remember that one of the most important and recurring themes of this channel is the idea that in physics, interpretation matters. Today we're going to see an example of why. Let's start with Sean Carroll, who's fairly confident when he shares his views about the purpose of life according to physics. Here's a representative sample of what he says. I have good news and bad news for you. The bad news is that the universe does not care about you. The universe is made of elementary particles that don't have intelligence, don't pass judgment, don't have a sense of right and wrong. And the fear is, the existential anxiety is, that if that purpose and meaningfulness is not given to me by the universe, then it can't exist. The good news is that this is a mistake, that there's another option, that we create purpose and meaning in the world. And I truly believe that if we accept the universe for what it is, if we approach reality with an open mind and an open heart, then we can create lives very much worth living. In this quote, Carroll is echoing an argument that is widely held today and goes back at least several hundred years. As we'll see in a couple of minutes, however, this argument appears to be getting weaker, not stronger, with the advancement of science. The universe may not care or cry if I drink cyanide, but it's probably going to kill me if I do. In the same way, nature isn't going to get excited if I eat the most nutritious foods and exercise regularly, but it's going to respond in a different way than if I drink cyanide. The same is true for every action I take as an individual, and for every collective action that we take as a species. The bottom line is, nature has rules that punish and reward according to its own purpose. But what is the purpose of nature? That depends on how you interpret physics, and different interpretations of physics, as Feynman pointed out, can lead you to radically different places. Let's analyze where I think Carroll's interpretations of physics goes wrong and compare it to an alternative that I think you'll agree leads to a much more satisfying place. In a sentence, Carroll's main problem is that he doesn't get fundamental enough. He starts his analysis at the wrong level of abstraction, and because of that, he's not able to say anything really meaningful or concrete about anything that really matters to people living in this world. In the video on the screen, links to which you'll find in the description, Sean quotes an astrobiologist who claims that the purpose of life is to hydrogenate carbon dioxide, and a physiologist who states that life is nothing but an electron looking for a place to rest. Carroll then springboards from this to a description of entropy, which is fine, but which is not as fundamental as physics gets. In other words, he begins at the wrong level of abstraction and concludes with the following sentence.
In a very real sense, the purpose of life is to continue the mission of the stars.
The purpose of life is to continue the mission of the stars? Really? What in the world does that mean? Humans are on the verge of nuclear catastrophe, potentially, and Carroll wants us to believe that our mission is to blow up like the stars. Wonderful. Let's contrast Carroll's interpretation of nature with another interpretation that comes to us from one of the most renowned physicists in the world, Juan Maldacena, who, according to the H-index, is at least 2 times more influential than Carroll in the professional physics community. In the following clip, Maldacena gives his take on the principle of least action, which is more fundamental than the large-scale level of entropy on which Carroll bases his argument.
So there is a principle in physics that says that any elementary particle tries to travel in a way that maximizes its own proper time. So the time it experiences is as long as possible. So that's the principle of maximal life or maximal experience time, and particles try to move in this way, and that's why particles, that's how we explain that particles move along straight lines.
Notice how Maldacena refers to the principle not as the principle of least action, but as the principle of maximal life. This is not an accident. Maldacena clearly understands that he's talking about something that is absolutely fundamental to physics, and he understands that interpretation matters. In contrast to Carroll, Maldacena studies nature at a more fundamental level and concludes with something more meaningful and accurate. The purpose of life, according to physics, is to exist as long as possible. If individual elementary particles seek to exist as long as possible, the principle of symmetry suggests why we as humans, who are made up of particles, also experience the desire to live as long as possible. This is not only a beautiful idea, it has profound implications. Why? Because it links our desire to avoid death to the physical and mathematical substructure of reality. This is going to come in handy when it comes to figuring out the most effective way to organize ourselves as a species. That brings me to the second and more important problem with Carroll's interpretation of physics, which reminds me of his preference for the many-worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, according to which there are an uncountable number of universes with an uncountable number of copies of you and I. The problem with Carroll's interpretations, all of them, is that they have nothing practical to say about anything that matters to us in this world, the one in which we actually live. In fact, Carroll seems to exacerbate the human predicament by suggesting that the purpose of life, if we choose it to be, is to blow up like the stars. If there are an infinite number of universes, and if only I can decide what meaning I give to life, why not blow the world up now? As I explained in our inaugural lecture, in sharp contrast to Sean Carroll's interpretation of physics, Yakir Aharonov's two-time interpretation of quantum mechanics and Juan Maldacena's work on the holographic principle have given rise to a much deeper and much more meaningful grasp of nature. The fruit of this deeper understanding is a concrete social choice mechanism designed to promote the long-term survival of humanity. This is nice because an interpretation of physics that connects long-term human survival to the physical and mathematical substructure of reality is not only consistent with the principle of least action, it's also beautifully aligned with our natural desire to exist as long as possible. And that's why interpretation matters. Thanks for your time. If you like what you heard, stick around and let's reason together.